Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Power and Policy, a Canadian Muslim Public Affairs Council program. I'm your host, Ginella Massa. This is a first of its kind series focused on the political engagement of Canadian Muslims, featuring voices from the community, from organizers and advocates to thought leaders and policy experts, exploring how Muslims impact Canadian politics and focusing on how our community should engage with the government on important issues, including civil liberties, justice, and structural Islamophobia. On today's episode, we are taking a closer look at how Canadian Muslims showed up during this year's federal election and how initiatives like MuslimsVote.ca, which was launched by CMPAC, impacted and shaped the conversation. So, what did this year's election results tell us? What impact did our community have? And where do we go from here on important issues? Our special guest today is Mohamad Fakih. He is an entrepreneur, philanthropist, and a community advocate. He's, of course, best known as the founder and CEO of Paramount Fine Foods, but also a vocal voice on Canadian politics. And he made waves this year as a longtime supporter of the Liberals, kind of breaking rank because of its inaction on specifically the war on Gaza, and that sparked a debate or a conversation around partisan loyalty and encouraging many to kind of reevaluate how and why and who we vote for. So we're going to have a great conversation today. Thanks for joining us, Mohammed.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, Khaled Qazzaz, Executive Director of the Canadian Muslim Public Affairs Council, has been at the forefront of political advocacy as a part of CMPAC and leading the MuslimsVote.ca initiative, mobilizing voters and advancing policy on justice, equity, and human rights. Khaled, good to see you again.
Thank you, Janela.
So let's think back to not that long ago with the federal election coming to a close, with the Liberal Party returning to power with a minority, a very close. I think there were so many races that were so close to see if it was going to push them into a majority. Um, Almost, 30-year record turnout, 68% of voter turnout. I think we saw Muslims really engaged this year. You were obviously quite vocal and have been for many years. How are you feeling about how all of this unfolded?
Thank you very much for having me. And I want to congratulate our community, specifically the Muslim community, but the greater and larger Canadian for showing up and voting. As we know, the importance of voting and the importance of engaging in the election. It's very, very, very crucial that we all believe that every single one vote count. And funny enough, that we saw
Literally.
some ridings like on one vote, right? One party won over the other. And if we were to find three ridings like this, the majority for the liberal would have been possible. And I would say the results are results that we expected. Muslims vote.ca wanted a majority,
Minority.
minority for the liberal. And so far, because what I'm hearing that there is more counts happening, and possibly the liberal will do a political strategic move where they'll convince an NDP or two to move within the liberal to get a majority, at least on the decision and votes.
Can you explain why you say you wanted a minority?
Well, I actually like minorities for every single year. In general, it will hold the party accountable. I don't think the Liberal Party deserved the majority this time around. And the only reason they actually deserve the minority because of the fear of Pierre Poilievre. So, in business and in our Muslim religion, there is something called the obligation of reduction of harm.
Mm.
And the reduction of harm came a choice between someone that we do not know, that it's surrounded by ministers that we know that they're incapable of making bigger decisions, and a choice of someone that could be terrible for Canada, terrible for our country, terrible for the Muslim community. So our community didn't have a great option. We were not making decision based on where our hearts are, but we were making decision based on the concept and principle of reduction of harm towards our community and towards Canada that we all love so much.
Let me bring Khaled into this conversation. We talked on election night about, MuslimsVote.ca being really powered by the idea of principled voting, and there being kind of these different schools of thought on whether that was the right approach. Now, as you have some time to reflect, when you look at the results, when you look at, the candidates that you endorsed, who won, who didn't, how are you feeling about the approach that you took in this election?
Thank you, Janelle. I think this is a key question for our community because our community for the longest time was voting based on, as Muhammad says, basically minimizing harm and or attempting to get some level of representation or some level of access. And for the first time, there was an opportunity for our community actually to come together and decide for itself what does it want out of this political process and to set their own principles that govern how they make these decisions. And effectively, this led to a clear representation of this what this community is all about and what does it stand for. So it sent a clear political message that I think was could not be ignored on issues of justice, in issues of humanity and human rights. But also, from a political standpoint, the community simply said that we are not taken for granted, that we are a community, that you have to earn our vote, that you have to respect our opinions, respect our positions, and basically engage with us. And the results showed that at least among the ridings and the candidates that basically look for the Muslim vote, they actually went into conversation, considered this, and respected and committed to the policy demands that the Muslim community and the Muslim Vote campaign put forward. And I think this was a new thing for our community. And I think moving forward, it's an effective way to demonstrate our political weight and our political strength.
Mm. Let's talk about the big issue that was on the minds of many Muslims, many voters of conscience as they had headed to the polls, and that is Gaza. And we've seen, some big shifts since the federal election. Where is your mind at in terms of how this issue came into play during this election and how that has informed the actions of uh, elected officials since then?
Well, I think the first 20 days, the election was around 36 days. The first 20 days was all about organizing, bringing an approach that it's supported by numbers. And that's why I jumped right away behind what Khaled and the team started on MuslimsVote.ca, because there's nothing better. Numbers don't lie. And they took a very educated approach. Well, it's led by principles. And as much as we were dominated by the fear of a Pierre Polyev, you talk to every single Muslim in the street and you see the guilt, you feel the guilt, they're living that guilt of every morning. What I said last time in our episode, every single Muslim and a lot of non-Muslims, they wake up in the morning, they do a crying session over Gaza, watching their phones, and then they wash their face, they go to work, and they put a smile. But then when the election came, and that was the promised date of holding officials accountable for 20 months of complicity, watching a genocide, watching what they will never accept on their children and accepting it on Gaza children. We thought we will hold them accountable freely, but then the fear of a Pierre Polyev came in the middle and actually made us have to rethink it over and over again. So the first 20 days, we were preparing ourselves, calculating discussions within our community. And I want to say, look, there was two approach in the community, but they were very close. The approach. One side love Gaza, the other side love Gaza. One side says, let us let us make sure that Pierre Poilievre will not become a prime minister. The other side said Pierre Poilievre will not become a prime minister, but at the same time, we need to have a conversation before an election because you need to actually set the table properly and negotiate properly when there is a leverage. After an election, there is no leverage. So the last 16 days, and after I saw the video of Minister of Foreign Affairs today, Anita Anand, in the synagogue, It's the day that I started by saying what exactly the community needed to say, at least part of the community needed to say, and get the attention of some politicians. But before me, MuslimsVote.ca did that. Set the stage, set their conditions, told the politicians, if you want our community support, you need to talk to us about the following. So it was not taken public. We start taking it public, and then we start giving the Liberal Party sleepless night, and we start giving every politician sleepless night. And you brought up the fact that despite I'm liberal, and until this afternoon, somebody texted me said, "I don't believe you voted, you endorsed the NDP. People made a mistake. I did not endorse the NDP.
Right.
I endorsed the principled approach of MuslimsVote.ca that endorsed majority of liberals. But what I said in my own writing,
In your specific riding of Oakville, where Anita Anand was
100%.
running.
And to our own community, I have to say something. It was the right thing to do for me as someone that people consider expert in politics. I've been in politics. I've been liberal. So I wanted to say to everybody, despite that my blood is liberal, I went against it for the sake of Gaza. And I wanted to make it easy on all of you and encourage you to do the right thing. It wasn't that because I have to admit, I've never met that candidate of the NDP, and nor she would have had won. I just didn't want to put my name behind a candidate, a liberal candidate that she was a minister and she's still a minister.
And Anita still won, but
100%.
as you said, it was a nail biter on an election night as to whether or not she was going to take it.
100%. And I had doubt that I would make her lose. And I wasn't actually voting against her to make her only lose. I was sending her a message that the same person that endorsed you before knowing you, when I found out that you're ready to see children being killed and women and men being starved, I would not vote for you. I gave her endorsement, her biggest endorsement, the election before this one.
Mm.
And from that day, her election changed. She admitted that. She thanked me for it. And I wanted to send her a message that there is a price when you do something like this to our community. And I wanted to encourage the rest of our community. So I think what Muslim votes that created, what we all did collectively, it's not Mohammed Fakih alone. I'm only I'm one person in this community. And what we all collectively did, and especially the last 2.5 weeks to 3 weeks, and a work of 2 years, like the Muslim Vote that CMPAC has worked for 2 years, 2 years hard work to actually put this together. We sent a message that Gaza will be always on the table. And we sent a message that's not going to be on the political table. It's going to be on your dining table, every single politician. Every single politician the last 16 years of the election, they were talking about how the Muslim community going to vote for them. And that was the success of the community. I would say our biggest success was minority government. But bigger than that was having Gaza on the table and having the politicians start thinking, because just a small piece of information. The day a politician is elected, 3 minutes after they start campaigning,
For the next
right?
one.
For the next one.
Right.
So now they start, and we start seeing different movement and different approach.
Right. And especially in a minority government, there's always
It's
the
only
risk,
3 years,
right?
so
Yeah.
a year and a half.
And so, how are you feeling now about the tone, the approach by Minister Anand now after being elected on this issue of Gaza?
I mean, definitely it's better. It's not good for her. I wouldn't say that. I can't thank her because she should have done it. It's too late. But you know what? If she can learn after 20 months, it's better for us, but it's not better for her. We are kind, we're forgiving, but we don't forget.
Hmm.
And we will remember who stood for us.
Hmm. Uh, Khaled, what are the conversations that you've had since the election, and particularly on this issue?
Yes, I just want to build on what Mohammed said in his previous response as it relates to elections, and then I'll quickly answer your question. Um, One of the important factors that we consider a win for our community and our campaign is actually putting Gaza on the elections agenda. Uh, Consciously, both the Liberal and the Conservative Party intentionally wanted it off the table They excluded it off the English debate, and they refused to engage on that particular issue. And the campaign, and as Muhammad says, we've been engaging with politicians on Gaza for a year and a half before the elections. And throughout the election, it was a primary policy issue with great detail that our community has advocated for. And every candidate that we engaged with, we engaged in close to 50 ridings that we have sent the community and our volunteers to engage with them and actually, as Muhammad says, put Gaza as an issue of conscience, as an issue for humanity, right? An issue of policy, and the policy demands are not too far from what the liberal policy or actually the Canadian government for the longest time is almost in sync with their foreign policy. It was not too far. So it was an important issue to be put on the agenda, and alhamdulillah, successfully it was put on the agenda. And for some candidate, it was actually a deciding factor. It was a factor that helped many candidates in Muslim majority ridings or in Muslim ridings where in ridings where the Muslims are able to swing, have a significant swing effect, because it assured these candidates, assured this community that these candidates will stand for the right thing, and it actually helped these candidates maintain and secure their positions. The entire 905, the most of the 905 area had this issue, had this assurance, and that led to the conversations that followed. We now have a bulk. We have 23 candidates who won through with our endorsements, or our endorsements helped them win. And we continued the conversation post-election, reminding them and congratulating them for taking a principled stance. It's actually a first time for Canadian candidates to stand up on an issue that might have been considered toxic 2 years ago. So they actually were courageous enough to stand up without the direct support of the party leadership, and they did this on their own, and they actually got the support of their constituency, and they won. So we engaged with them, asking them to continue to take this forward and to start to prepare basically the next practical steps. And the next practical steps, unfortunately, as we see a starving population in front of our own eyes. People who've been denied food, basic livelihood for the past almost 3 months now, and basically consistently being bombed. We have volunteers who have direct family members being bombed, lost in these past only 2 3 months, lost their families. So we've asked them to continuously engage and don't have to wait for committees to be formed or others. And frankly, seeing the government and Minister Anand now taking proactive steps, seeing the Prime Minister also engaging with his with his colleagues from other nations and making statements to acknowledge these issues is a good first step. However, immediate action is what's expected, not just rhetoric. Action is also expected from this government.
Mhm.
I'm just going to add one small thing. We have to remember that we need to know how to celebrate as a community, because we tend not to celebrate. We tend to say everything we do doesn't count, everything. This election, this community has debunked one very important idea, that if you are a candidate and you vote for our issues, you will never become a minister. And we have two ministers appointed today in this last government that they actually signed the pledge Vote Palestine. We have Shafkat Ali and we have Adam Vancouverden. And that shows, and it gives us in our hand an example, set a precedence to anyone next election, any politicians that try to say, I can't do that because I have an election to win. We can actually answer that MuslimsVote.ca had a 23 candidate as candidate that won, despite of them taking a principled position, and two that signed the pledge Vote Palestine, right? We see that one is changing. But I'm asking our community, please don't soften the pressure. Like Laura Albanese said today, as long as there is no two-way embargo, I don't care that somebody will tweet. That's not action. I'm gonna do the same thing as Khaled did. We need to keep the pressure because that's not action yet.
Right.
And don't tell me that you're sanctioning and that sanction will impact them in 2 years when you're actually selling them weapon on the other side or buying from them weapon. So as long as the Canadian government or any of the allies of the Canadian government are not enforcing and putting in place a two-way embargo and making immediate sanctions that impact Israel's ability to kill more and starve more, we should not stop our advocacy. Actually, we should continue the pressure and even put more up the pressure, and especially on the candidates that we supported, and more on the candidate that actually did not support us when we asked them to sign the pledge vote Palestine or be part of MuslimsVote.ca endorsement.
I think you just said something important, which is to celebrate the wins, acknowledge the wins, thank them for moving the needle in the right direction, but keep pushing them in the way that they need to go. To that end, Khaled, how do we keep this momentum going? I think if there is one measure of success of the Muslims Vote campaign of CMPAC, it is mobilizing and engaging community.
Right.
So, how do we continue that conversation? Gaza is one issue, it's the issue of the moment, but there will be other issues that impact us as Muslims, as Canadians, as residents, as people who have kids who go to school, as members of the society. How do we keep the Muslim community engaged on the issues that matter to us, and letting politicians know that our voice and our vote matters?
That's a great question. And we are an advocacy and a lobbying organization first. Election is not our end goal. Election is a mean, is a leverage that we use to fulfill and achieve our policy objectives and policy demands. And one of the other successes of our campaign actually is that we managed to get 3,000 people to sign on interested in volunteering and helping and supporting. And these are average people, average Canadians and average Canadian Muslims who want to see a difference and want to make a difference. Our ability to mobilize and continue to engage, continue to advocate and engage with elected officials is basically the next step. And I think we are set up to carry and continue to mobilize along these directions. We've articulated these policy demands that we're advocating for. We're engaging with the up-to-date issues. And as soon as the elected officials are in their offices, our community will continue to engage with them. Our organization is engaged with the politicians from the moment they were voted in, and we are hoping that we see change and we see direction. We already start to see change in language. We're already starting to see some initiative, but as Mohamad says, none of this is adequate yet and still requires a lot to build on, and actually a lot that the Canadian government can issue on with political will and political leadership. So the issue of recognizing the Palestinian statehood will be a game changer with Western countries endorsing or supporting a Palestinian state, and will push towards peace in the region unilaterally. And second, the issue of supporting an arms sale is actually a political and a legal liability on this government, because few years from now, people will look back, people will raise cases and file suits that basically your weaponry, your parts actually contributed to a genocide, and it will be punished. So it is actually the moral and responsible thing to do from a government is to not be part of a genocide. And these are actions within the hand of the government that can be made with a political decision. It does not require too much of engagement. And then finally, direct action that impact Canadians. We see, instead of basically respecting and celebrating and encouraging freedom of speech, encouraging people to assemble and protest, and as long as they're protesting even in the right way, without any inciting violence, without basically targeting communities and others, this should be encouraged, because it basically puts the checks and balances in our community and keeps it there. We see a direction of attempting to limit and target protests and people who organize protests. And this is something that is affecting us as Canadians, not just on Palestine, on everything, and on our actually democracy and on freedoms. And this is an area where we really all need to work together to prevent and protect our freedoms and rights.
I want to ask you a question about partisanship. I'm going to bring this question to you as well, because I think in this particular federal campaign, there was a lot of focus on what some may see as an anti-Poilievre movement, an anti-conservative movement. The reality is there are many Muslims who align with conservative values who would vote conservative. There could be a future where we have a conservative government. How can you just kind of bring that into the conversation about whether you see the Muslim community needing to align with a particular party or how we work with whatever government is in power based on the places where we do align.
That's a great question, Janella. And uh, uh, from the beginning of our campaign, we were very clear that this is not a partisan campaign. This is a campaign that spells out what our community expects of our politicians. And we even did not make it an expectation of individual parties. We brought it down to individual candidates. These are the principles, these are the policies that we want individual candidates to endorse. And we kept it open for all parties to engaged that we engaged with. We engaged with all parties or all competing parties, and uh, uh, until the Conservative Party clearly indicated and none that they will not allow even their own individual candidates to support policy demands on Palestine and otherwise. They basically chose not to support
And it
our
wasn't
community.
just Gaza. That wasn't the only criteria. There was other criteria
So
for
our
you.
policy demands primarily focused on Gaza because this is the issue of concern for our community, but we also included policy demands that relates to structural Islamophobia because this is one like major pain and frustration that our community sees and faces. And we've also articulated the Gaza demands, policy demands, as it relates to our freedoms and our civil liberties. So it was not only a foreign policy issue, it was also a domestic Canadian issue that was open for all parties to engage. And we've got engagement and we've endorsed liberal candidates, mostly liberal candidates, NDP candidates, and Green Party candidates, and one independent actually. So we've endorsed across the board. And we've opened these endorsements for those who come forward and make a commitment on these policy demands.
I want to bring that question more personally to you as someone who, as you said, has been a longtime liberal supporter. You are on, Justin Trudeau's bus. You had endorsed folks like Anita Anand in the past. You say you bleed liberal red. Where do you stand now, and how do you see the future of your place in supporting partisan politics?
Well, uh, as Khalid said, it's a very very good question, especially for a lot of our listeners today that they're saying, "What's going on?" Right? A lot of conservative voted for Carney because they like his policies on money and on finance, and then
Economy.
a lot of
Yes.
liberal went voted for NDP because they didn't like where the liberals stand. I think there is a shift in the Canadian politics, and we've been seeing that shift for the last 3 to 5 years. I think uh, the conservative ran a terrible, terrible campaign. What they did in that campaign, they crushed the NDP and they crushed the People Party. This is how far to the right they went, to the extreme that they actually attacked the liberal. So the liberal actually took over a lot of the NDP vote. And that was the terrible work of the conservative leadership group and the person, which is Jenny Burns, that ran the campaign of Pierre Poilievre, right? So that's one part of it. I learned from Hazel McCallan. I'll never forget that day. She was on CP24 and she endorsed Doug Ford, conservative, and Charles Souza, liberal, in the same breath.
Mm.
And when she finished the interview, I was with her on CP24 and walking out, I said, "What's wrong with you?" She said, "What's wrong with you? You vote for people, not party."
Mm.
She said, "There are some people in the party that they're really not principled, but they jump on the bus of the party, but you shouldn't really attach your name to them. So vote for people, not for a party." And that works perfectly for our community because in our community, for example, there's a lot of the NDP values that we do not agree an absolute agreement with with those values. But there are people in the NDP that carried our community's causes over the last 2 years, much more than any liberal that values and principles matches ours. So those people we should not have allowed to be punished, and we should have sent them a message that we appreciate their work, and our message is money and vote. The politic language is money and vote, donations and vote. That's what it is, right? And in the Liberal Party, there are the right people that we wanted to support because they carried our causes as well. And there are people that we wanted to punish. But in the Liberal Party, we had the pressure of Pierre Poilievre. So we had to widen the compass and our list of forgiven people just to make sure that we do not get the people who possibly would harm our community, or as well, most importantly, would harm Canada. And on the one point that you asked Khaled about, that it's very important. A lot of people says Palestine is a foreign issue. Palestine is not a foreign issue. My last video in response to Anita Anand in the night of the election, she was talking about the sovereignty of Canada. And I replied to her with my video and I'm saying, see how it feels when our sovereignty under attack from Donald Trump. What Martin Luther King Jr. said, injustice anywhere is a risk on justice everywhere. When Donald Trump saw the entire world leadership watching the Gaza Strip being stolen, the people of Gaza being treated the way they were treated, that gave a license to bullies like Donald Trump to do it to Canada, Greenland, and other places. So if Canada has a complaint about what's happening to Canada from the United States, Canada should be the first in line to defend the Gaza Strip from what Israel is doing to it. Because you cannot treat international law with two set of rules. And if you are afraid for something to happen to you, do not do it to others. And Canada has witnessed, has funded what was happening to the Palestinian land.
Khaled, I'm going to leave the last word to you. We're having this important conversation. You've created this platform for us to speak about important issues to Canadians, Canadian Muslims. What's your hope and what's your message to those who are maybe newly engaged in politics? And what's your hope moving forward?
To leave this on a hope note, I believe Canada is a land of opportunities, and actually is a beautiful land that allows all of us to engage at all levels. And this election was a perfect example where our community mobilized in a different way, engaged everybody in all ages, all from all different backgrounds, and they were able to connect with their politicians, with the candidates, and they were able to send their voices across. Their voices were heard, their voices made a difference. And that in itself is a message of hope that you can actually be the change and be the difference in your community. And that's the beauty of this country. The second thing is, when we advocate as a community, it is an advocacy for Canada. It's not an advocacy against any part of Canada, because we live in this country by maintaining and protecting one another. So when we spell out our interests, it's an interest that intersects with so many other interests. And as we say, we're this for respecting international law, for respecting human rights, for basically, as Mohamad spoke about, territorial integrity and our sovereignty. So these are the values and principles that govern our positions, and these overlap with almost all Canadians. So it is a campaign for Canada, not a campaign against anyone. And I invite all Canadians actually to engage in conversation and dialogue to reach even better outcomes on our internal policies and on our foreign policies. And I hope this is an invitation for more and more engagement and a better future.
Khaled and Mohamad, thank you both for your time. Thank you both for your work and your leadership. And thank you at home for tuning in to Power and Policy. We will hope you'll continue to engage with us here as we bring you thoughtful conversations on issues impacting Canadian Muslims. Thanks for watching. Assalamu alaikum.